Cork dorks. This is where they live. A coy red wine with an aroma redolent of lilac and cherry fruit, but cherries grown facing north. I can see the sun. It's full. The aroma is telling me that the man who picked this had beautiful hands, and I can see the earth from which it grew. Wine doesn't have to be like that. Hi, my name is Jerry. I created this DVD to teach you an easy system to learn about wine. It focuses on the basics of aroma, color, and flavor, stuff that you can learn using terms that you'll understand. The DVD is broken down into two parts. In the first one, we'll focus on the elements of wine, and the second one is a mini tasting. Now that you've gotten this far, probably the best idea is to open a few bottles of wine and follow along. That is, if you want to be the most knowledgeable person in your group. Or if you want to have a lot of fun, invite some friends over, open a few more bottles of wine, and follow along with me. Hi, my name is Jerry, but to my friends and coworkers, I'm known as the Wine Guy. I've spent 20 years in the business, traveling the world, tasting wine, and teaching people about how to taste wine. The language of wine can be confusing. Terms like lush and bright and crisp have meaning for some people and not for others. We're going to try and work on defining the terms so that you can use them easily and so that anyone you speak to can understand exactly what you're saying. We're going to describe color in only 4 different terms, and we're going to focus on the components of wine that are the acidity, the tannin, the alcohol, and if it is there, sweetness. All of these components are not coming from me, they'll be inside you. You have the ability to discern alcohol and acidity, oak, and fruit. So I'm going to guide the tasting, but you'll be exploring and experiencing them at home. In the many years that I've been teaching consumers about wine and tasting wine, I've noticed that they're very unfamiliar with terms that I think of as simple. Things like the word varietal, which when I use it, I mean the grape type. Many people are confused as to the idea that Pinot Grigio or Chardonnay is not a producer or an area, but is actually the name of the grape. So today we're going to look at 6 varietals: Pinot Grigio, Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Merlot, and Cabernet Sauvignon. Many people believe that you have to spend a lot of money in order to get a good bottle of wine. Nothing could be further from the truth. Good wines can be found in every price category. With our simple technique of learning how to taste wine, you'll be able to find a price point that you feel comfortable with, explore the wine style that you like, and be able to share it with friends and family. When you're done with this DVD, it would be a good idea to invite some friends over, go to your local store, and focus on these varietals and have a little tasting. Because after all, wine always goes better with food and friends. One of the things people have the most trouble with is opening the bottle of the wine. This is a corkscrew, called a waiter's corkscrew, and it's a double hinge. This can make opening a bottle quite easy. You just need to learn a few secrets, the first being the blade. This piece is used to cut the foil at the top of the bottle. The other piece that we'll use is the hinge. This is a double hinged model and makes it easier to open the wine. The worm is the turned part of the corkscrew. This is what will actually enter the cork. And this part we call the lever. This is what we use to extract the cork. Holding the bottle on the angle, it's very easy to rotate the bottle and make a very clean cut. The foil should come right off. Now we're going to use the worm. This is the part that gets inserted into the cork. You'll notice at the tip, it's on an angle. This is where most people make their mistake. They come at the cork straight down and try to use the tip of the corkscrew to pierce the cork. A better way is to approach the cork at an angle, laying the bottom of the corkscrew flat against the cork, and then tipping up just to pierce. It's much easier, and a half turn is all you need to get the cork started. As you can see, it's already engaged. Turning it doesn't require much energy at all. I'm just using my fingers and my wrist. It's very important to know when to stop turning the corkscrew. You don't want to go all the way down. If you do, you won't have enough leverage to pull the cork out. So leave about a half a turn at the top and you should be fine. Now you engage the first part of the hinge, and it's easiest if you use your thumb to keep the corkscrew straight. This will stop you from pulling the cork out at an angle and possibly snapping it off. The lever system is very simple to use. You just use your lever to lift up. Move to the second hinge, again using your thumb to stabilize. You're just going to come straight up. I can already feel the cork starting to give way. When I'm done, I like to work it out slowly. Opening with great flourish may look nice, but an unintended consequence could be the splashing of wine, something you don't want to do. This is a new style corkscrew. It's called the Rabbit, and as you can see from the shape of it, why it gets its name. It has several features that make it easy to use. First off, it doesn't have a knife, so you don't have the sharp part, and the worm is coated in Teflon. This makes it easier to drive into the cork and easier to pull out later. The Rabbit doesn't come with a knife, but it does come with this foil cutter. It fits on top of the bottle, and you pinch it tight and twist it side to side, making a clean cut. The Rabbit is quite easy to use. This lifts the worm up, and you center it down on the bottle. Squeezing the handles to hold the bottle in place and to hold the worm, you simply lever down. When you've reached the bottom, you're done. Now you need only pull up, and the cork comes up every time. Once the cork is free of the bottle, you just tilt the handle back, grasp the cork firmly, and the cork comes free. This corkscrew is called the two-arm corkscrew, and you can see how it works. The problem is that it doesn't come with a foil cutter, and it doesn't have a knife built in. So the old-fashioned way will have to suffice. Again, using your thumb against the blade, tilt the bottle on an angle. Twisting the bottle, you can make a very clean cut. Be careful because you have a lot of exposed blade and it'd be very easy to cut yourself. This is sort of self-centering. The worm comes down, it gets pointed right in the center, it sits on top. You drive it in, and this requires more effort than the waiter's corkscrew to get started. Once the arms are in the upright position, you need to grasp firmly and pull down. One of the problems with this type corkscrew is that corks come in varying lengths. The worm on this is very short, and if the cork is very long, it can be difficult to pull out. One of the questions people ask me is, how long can I keep an open bottle of wine? How long will it stay fresh? The answer is complicated. Oxygen is the enemy of wine. The more oxygen there is in the bottle, the greater the chance of oxidation. So if you're going to drink a bottle of wine and you only want a glass, it's best to pour that glass quickly, put the cork in as far down as you can, and get it right into the fridge. This way it should last 3 or 4 days with no problems. It seems there are almost as many wine glasses as there are wines available. Today we use this. It's a good all-around basic wine glass, suitable for reds and whites and everyday use. A glass with this shape is most typically associated with white wines. This part of the glass is called the chimney, and as you can see, it's narrower at the top than it is at the bottom. This helps to concentrate the aromas of white wines. White wines can sometimes have more faint aromas than red. These two glasses were designed specifically for red wines, and as you can see, they're quite a bit larger than the others. They're also made from crystal. This is the clearest quality glass you can use for a wine glass. This glass was designed with Cabernet in mind. The wide surface allows evaporation of aroma, and the large area allows you to put your nose deeply into the glass. This glass was designed for Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir can sometimes have a faint nose. This tight chimney allows the aroma to be concentrated. These glasses consume a lot of volume, so if you're thinking about having a party, these might not be the ones to use. Also, they're usually expensive and pretty easy to break. To begin our tasting, we really just need to focus on a glass just like this. This glass is perfect for everyday drinking. These glasses are wonderful, beautiful to look at and enhance the quality of the wine. But this glass will suffice for most people in everyday consumption. We're going to begin our tasting today by looking at white wines. You can see that we're working on a white surface in fairly bright light. This is important for us to adequately assess the different colors of the wines. I'll also be using a white back card to show you the wine color more brilliantly. And what we're really going to take a look at is the colors and the acidity and the fruit, something we haven't talked too much about. But fruit is what wine is made from, and so it should taste of fruit. Each of these wines has a different color and a different flavor, aroma. We're going to be looking at each one in detail. We're looking for the color variation from the center of the glass out to the edges. The very edge where the wine meets the glass is always going to be clear, and it's just inside that edge where you'll see the first part of aging. If the color turns, for white wines, a slight brown or a gold, that means that the wine may have had some aging. And in order to better illustrate the color, I'm going to use this white back card to show you the differences in colors. Color is our first entry into the wine, and we use it to look at a couple of different things. The color names that we use in white wine are straw, lemon, and gold. As you can see, the Pinot Grigio is straw, the Sauvignon Blanc is lemon, and the Chardonnay is gold. If you stick to these three colors, you'll find it much simpler to determine the actual color of the wine rather than trying to find fancy ways to say yellow or say gold. As you can see, the Pinot Grigio is the lightest in color, and the Chardonnay is the deepest. Right in the middle is the Sauvignon Blanc. Color can tell us something about the quality of a wine and also about the age of the wine. Wines with light, bright colors are usually young. Wines that have deeper colors, lending themselves towards, say, amber or gold, are wines usually of age. Now we're going to compare the wines using a different technique. We've already looked at the colors against the white background. Now we're going to assess the color from looking down into the wine. This gives us a better opportunity to determine the intensity of the color. Intensity is important because it tells us something about the quality. So while the color can tell us about the age of the wine, the intensity can tell us about the quality. Now remember, quality is different. A $6 bottle of wine should have a different intensity than a $20 bottle of wine. So when you're judging wine, make sure you're judging against its price point, not against your favorite wine or a more expensive wine. We're going to begin by looking down through and looking at the colors, and we're looking for a solid color that starts in the core of the wine and works its way out to the edge. Right along the glass, it's always going to be clear. Just inside that is where we're going to find the first signs of aging, where the wine will start to change colors. Another way of being able to do this is to tilt the wine away from you, again over a white surface in a bright room, and look down through the wine. Looking at the Pinot Grigio, we can see that it's very light colored. But what we want to do is look at the color from the center of the glass to the edge. If the color stays solid from the center to the edge, it's usually a sign of quality. This color is what we would call straw. Sauvignon Blanc is lemon colored and quite deep in terms of color from center to edge. The Chardonnay is the deepest color of the three, closest to gold. The color of a wine can also change, and particularly with Chardonnay, if it's aged in oak. It can give it a little deeper hue. Again, we see that the quality is quite good, with the color being strong from the center to the edge of the glass. White wines can be more difficult to look through than red wines, but with a little practice, I'm sure you'll get very good at it. Next, we're going to look at the aroma of wine. In order to do this, we're going to swirl the wine. If you feel more comfortable leaving the glass on the table, that's okay. With a little practice, you'll be able to hold it up and swirl it around. In fact, if you do this often enough, you'll find yourself swirling your coffee in the morning, your juice, and even your soda. It can be quite an annoying little thing. After we swirl, we're going to hold the wine to our nose. When you smell wine, you need to be able to take a deep inhalation. You need to breathe deeply. The olfactory bulb, the one that receives all the information that you're going to smell, is buried deep in your brain. In order to get the aroma back there, you must inhale deeply. Some people like to inhale like a dog, short puffs, short, quick inhales. This allows the wine to wash over the olfactory bulb. After I've smelled the wine, I want to take a minute to think about the aroma that I've had. We're going to talk about the typical aromas found in each of these varietals, or grapes. Starting with the Pinot Grigio, a typical aroma would be of minerals and white flowers. I know it sounds like a lot of silliness, but when you put your nose into the glass, that's what you'll find. Sauvignon Blanc is a grape that has aromas typical of citrus fruits. And if it comes from a warm climate, you can get tropical fruits. So start with the basics of lemon and lime, and if you find something like kiwi or mango, that's good too. The aroma associated with Chardonnay is typically oak. Now, a lot of people don't recognize it as oak, but oak smells like vanilla or toast or coffee or toffee. But there are fruit aromas in there also, and the most general ones are apples, both red and green, and pear. We're going to begin tasting the wine by doing just what we've learned so far, swirling and sniffing. We're going to put a good amount of wine in our mouths, and we want to roll it all over our tongue. This can look a little silly, but when you're tasting wine, that's okay. You're going to try to analyze the sensations that we talked about earlier. The acidity on the sides of the tongue, tannin, if there is any, on the back of the tongue, sweetness, which will be on the tip of the tongue, and alcohol, which will be in the back of the throat. What we're looking for is balance. Is there too much acidity and not enough fruit? Is there too much alcohol and not enough fruit? Is there too much tannin and not enough fruit? It's the balance that we're looking for and the intensity of the fruit flavor that ultimately determine whether we like the wine or not. A quick word about spitting. If you're going to be tasting more than 6 wines, it's a good idea. Just a little bit of alcohol in each of these glasses is enough to make you lose concentration. Absolutely make you relax and make the conversation easier, but it will make it hard to concentrate on tasting the wines. I'm thinking about the acidity, and the acidity of Pinot Grigio is quite high. This is because it comes from a northern climate where the grapes don't get a chance to fully ripen. Less ripe grapes have less sugar. Less sugar translates into less alcohol. Less ripe grapes also have less flavor and aroma particles. So when I'm tasting a Pinot Grigio, I'm thinking of those aromas that we talked about earlier, the white flower and the minerals, and I'm thinking about its acidity. As we're rolling the wine across our tongue, we're paying attention to the level of acidity. Is it high, low, or medium? The sweetness, is it present, or is it high, low, or medium? We use the same words over and over again to make it easy. One thing we haven't touched on yet is body. Body is a word that we use for the weight of the wine in our mouths. Body is both a combination of alcohol and fruit concentrate. We'd refer to wine as light, medium, or full-bodied. An easy way to think about it is, if you've ever consumed milk, is to think about skim milk, whole milk, and heavy cream. Those would be your light, medium, and full. When we're looking at acidity, we're looking for balance, but we're also looking, is it high, low, or medium? This wine has high acidity. The next thing that we're going to look at is tannin. White wines typically don't have any tannin because it's found in the skin of the grapes where all the color is. As you can see by the light color, there probably isn't going to be tannin in the wine. White wines don't typically ferment or age, or aren't usually made in contact of the grape skins. So that's why they're lighter in color. Red wines sit on the grape skins for a longer time and they absorb more color. That's where the tannin is, in the skin of the grape. One of the things people always say about wine is that it smells sweet. You can't actually smell sugar, but you can taste it. And a lot of people think that when they smell something sweet, that it tastes sweet. The way to determine whether the wine is actually sweet or whether you just think it's sweet is to put the wine in your mouth and pinch your nose closed. This will stop the aroma from going into your olfactory bulb and won't allow you to make a determination based on aroma. It'll only be able to tell you if the tip of your tongue is dancing with the sugar. If there is no sensation, there is no sugar. So a lot of the times when we smell something sweet, we think that it's sweet when really it's dry. Pinot Grigio has an intense aroma, very easy to smell. So we talk about intensity as being penetrating or light, medium, or full. This one happens to have a very full aroma, very easy to smell. You don't have to inhale deeply in order to get its full smell. The Sauvignon Blanc, which comes from California, has an aroma of citrus, and when we taste it, quite high in acidity. In fact, the acidity seems to be the thing that lingers on and on. Again, no tannin and no sweetness. The white wines we're tasting today also are all dry. They have no sugar in them. Alcohol in a grape that comes from a cooler climate, less ripe, less sugar, will make lower alcohol. Again, these aren't low alcohol wines, but you're talking about something between 12% and 13.5%. It doesn't sound like a wide spread, but when you taste the wines, you really can tell the difference. Again, the weight. Pinot Grigio, light-bodied. Sauvignon Blanc, medium-bodied. Let's taste the Chardonnay. Again, aroma and flavors of apples, and the oak really comes to the front, sort of like a creme brulee or vanilla. The acidity is there, but it's not as quite as prominent as it was in the first two wines. There's a heaviness or fullness of the fruit that I can feel in my mouth. This is the sensation that most people like about Chardonnay, that and the oak aromas. So here we have three white wines, completely different. Pinot Grigio, light-bodied, medium to high in acidity, but with lower alcohol and lower flavor. Then we have Sauvignon Blanc. It's your medium wine, medium in color, medium in alcohol, high in acidity though, and that's very important. High acidity wines are wines that go very well, match very well with food. And then we have our Chardonnay. Chardonnay is typically low to medium in acid. It's very soft. Acidity and alcohol and tannin, if it's there, and sweetness are all the components that make wine have a lovely balance and complexity. It's that in combination with the fruit that give the wine the perfect flavor. The key to enjoying wine is experimentation. Today we tasted just 3 white wines, and there are literally hundreds available. Using the skills you've acquired today, learning about color and aroma and taste, you can decide which one is for you. I advise you to go down and buy a few bottles of the same type and have a little tasting with your friends. This can be a lot of fun. Open a couple of bottles, pour them out side by side, and run through the steps we've done today. Look at the color, smell the wines, taste the wines, think about the acidity, think about the sweetness, think about the alcohol and the body. Have some fun with it. It's, after all, a relaxing and enjoyable way to spend an evening. Let's take a look at red wines now. The wines we've chosen to illustrate the components of body are Pinot Noir, for light-bodied, Merlot, for medium-bodied, and Cabernet Sauvignon, for full-bodied. Each of these has different fruit characteristics, different levels of acidity, alcohol, and tannin. We're going to taste tannin here, which we didn't taste in our white wines. And just like our white wines, we're also not going to taste any sugar. The first one is Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir is famous in an area in France called Burgundy. There it makes exceptional wines. It's grown in many places in the world, but Burgundy seems to be its favorite place. This one comes from California and is a good example of what the grape can be made into. Our Merlot also comes from California, and it's one of the most popular grape types available in the world today. It's soft and easy to drink, and people really seem to like it. Cabernet is what people call a big wine. It fills the mouth with flavor, and it's got a dry, tanniny taste. We'll explain that later on. But each one of these wines was chosen because they're typical of the type, so that when you go into your store, you can look for Pinot Noir, Merlot, and Cabernet Sauvignon. We're going to now look at the color of red wines. It sounds kind of simple, right? Red wine should be red. But there are shades of red. Let's start with the color purple. It's usually a color of youth. The second color would be ruby, a slightly deeper red, more cherry. And then we have garnet, which is usually found in a wine with some aging in it. To illustrate the colors more clearly, we're going to use a piece of white cardboard behind the glasses so that you can see more clearly the difference in the colors. As you can see, the Pinot Noir is the lightest in color, the Cabernet the deepest. What this tells us about the wine is a little bit about the quality of the wine, and the color tells us a little bit about the age of the wine. The Pinot Noir is what we would call garnet. This usually indicates that there's been some aging in the wine. The Merlot is deep colored, but ruby. The Cabernet, deeper still, and in the ruby family also. Now we're going to use another technique to look at the color. We're going to tilt the glass at a 45-degree angle away from us, over a white cloth in a well-lit room, and look through the glass, through the wine. This gives us a good idea of the intensity of the color of the wine, and what we're looking for is a solid color in the center, staying the same color as it reaches out towards the edge of the glass. That's an indication usually of quality. If you start to notice a color difference at the edge of the glass, that's usually an indication of some age. Don't worry if at the closest edge to the glass the wine appears to be water or clear. That's okay. So what we're looking for is the depth of color. You can see that the Pinot Noir is a garnet color, and the color is very solid. It's pretty much the same from the center to the edge. The Merlot is also very deep in color, although it has a little bit of break towards the edge. This is usually an indication of some quality, or it can be the beginning of some age. Our Cabernet Sauvignon is deep. In fact, if you were to put a piece of paper underneath it, you wouldn't be able to read through it. This wine is opaque. So we see that the color is deep from the center of the glass all the way to the edge. The second part about tasting wine, after you've looked at it, is to smell it. The first thing that we have to do is swirl the glass. What this does is allows some of the oxygen to get in with the wine and also allows some of the aroma to start to evaporate. We need to do this in order to get the full sense of the smell. And when you see me put my nose in the glass, don't be alarmed if I seem to be going all the way in. I need to inhale deeply in order to get the aroma all the way into my nose, deep where I can tell all the subtle smells and aromas that it may have. When you're tasting wine at home, you have to do this too. It looks a little silly, but you'll get used to it. When we use terms to describe the aroma and the flavor of wine, it can be a little bit difficult. When I use words like raspberry and strawberry, I don't mean that the wine is made from raspberries and strawberries, or that there's any raspberry and strawberry in them. What I mean is that the wine reminds you of a strawberry or reminds you of a raspberry. Wines of low aroma can be hard to smell, and that means they usually don't have a lot of flavor either. Wines that have a very open aroma are easy to smell and are easy to determine the fruits. Pinot Noir typically smells of strawberries or raspberries, so it's a very easy aroma to pick out. Most of us are good with that. Merlot typically has aromas of, say, chocolate and blueberries. Sounds like pretty heady stuff, but it's actually a very pleasant smell. Not sweet, but rich and ripe. Cabernet Sauvignon is famous for its aroma of black currant or cassis. I prefer to use terms like berry, and then I decide whether the berry is red or black. And if it is black or red, is it dried or is it fresh? Is it jam or is it jelly? Is it candy? And I use these terms to help me specifically decide what aroma I'm smelling. And this goes for tasting too. When I put the wine in my mouth, I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to try to decide, is the fruit sweet fruit, fresh fruit, candied fruit, or jam? This one has a very nice oak aroma. I'm picking up the scent of a toasted oak. We've looked at the wine, we've smelled the wine, and now we get to taste the wine. This is the fun part. When we taste, we're going to break it into two distinct pieces. We're going to use our tongue to tell us about acidity, tannin, and alcohol, and if there's any sugar. And we're going to use it to reaffirm the aromas, flavors, that we had when we smelled the wine. To do this, we're going to start right at the beginning again by swirling the wine, smelling the wine, and putting a lot of wine in our mouths. When we do that, we're looking for the acidity, which we find on the sides of our tongue, the tannin, which is across the back of our tongue, and the alcohol, which we find in the back of our throat. The sensation of tannin is one of drying, so it makes your mouth feel dry. Acidity makes your mouth water. and alcohol we all know is a slight burn. Alcohol can also have a sweet taste to it. So sometimes that can fool us to thinking the wine is sweet when there is no sugar. It's the sensation of the alcohol in our mouths. The Pinot Noir first. A quick word about spitting. It's very important if you're going to be tasting more than, say, 4 or 5 wines. The alcohol has a very relaxing effect, but it can be a little bit dangerous. So when you're tasting at home, try to keep your tasting to just 6 bottles at a time. Taste through and spit, and then you can go back and drink a glass of the wine that you find most pleasurable. So Pinot Noir is a grape of low tannin, high acidity, and deep flavor, strawberries and raspberries mostly. I've had the Pinot Noir in my mouth, and the sensation of acidity is very prominent. That's typical for this grape, especially when it's grown in a cool climate. Cool climate grapes don't get as ripe. They don't get as much sugar. Sugar translates to alcohol. Ripeness also determines how much flavor content there is and how much fruit intensity there'll be in the wine. A cool climate wine will have less alcohol and less fruit intensity. It doesn't mean that the wine isn't beautiful and that it isn't balanced. It just means that it doesn't feel as full in your mouth. So while we're talking about full, let's talk about body. We have light, medium, and full body. You could look at light-bodied wines as being similar to skim milk, medium-bodied wines, regular milk, and full-bodied wines as heavy cream. So it's the weight of the wine in your mouth physically and the impression that the fruit leaves in your mouth that determine its body. Don't be fooled by alcohol alone, because alcohol itself has a very heavy weight. Lighter wines, less alcohol, less weight, but we need to pay attention to the fruit. This Pinot Noir has good fruit intensity. The alcohol is moderate. The acidity is high. So we use words for acidity and for tannin, light, medium, and full. Learn to use these same words over and over again, and as you taste through 3 different types of wine, you'll be able to judge. This one has high acidity, this one has medium acidity, this one has low acidity. The same thing with tannin. Pinot Noir typically has low tannin, Merlot can have moderate to high tannin, and Cabernet most typically has high tannin. Tannin is the part of the wine that dries your mouth. Acidity is the part of the wine that makes your mouth water. These 2 pieces working together extend the fruit flavor in your mouth for an extended time. This is what we call the finish. We're also looking at the finish to see that the wine is pleasant, that it finishes with a pleasant taste. This is very important. I mean, this is what drinking is all about. When you swallow the wine, the longer that you're reminded of the flavor of the wine, again, a better sign of quality. Wines that finish short, that is when you swallow them, you don't taste it any longer, are wines that are usually of commercial quality. They're good, but not exceptional. Wines that linger in your mouth after 30 seconds or 60 seconds are very good wines. Now, you only need to try this when you're tasting wine. When you're drinking wine, be aware of it, but you don't have to pull your stopwatch out to determine how long the finish lasts. Let's look at the Merlot. Fruit flavors of blueberries and chocolate, a little bit of oak. The acidity is medium. Merlot is really the medium of wine. Medium acidity, medium bodied, medium alcohol. We refer to alcohol also as being light, medium, or full. Slightly more alcohol than there is tannin, the thing that dries my mouth. And the acidity is good, also medium, but balanced. Balance is what's important in wine. The balance between the tannin and the fruit, between the fruit and the acidity, and between the alcohol and the fruit. If any one of those components is out of shape, wine tastes angular, or it tastes like you can feel the different pieces. Wine is delicious and well balanced when all the pieces seem to fit together. The Cabernet. This is what people refer to as a big wine. Full of fruit, full of tannin, full of alcohol, but low in acidity. Acidity is what brings life to wine. If the acidity is too low, the wine tastes flat or dull. Too much acidity, and it's like squeezing a lemon in your mouth. It's the combination of the fruit and its fruit intensity that matches to the acidity and the tannin and the alcohol that give the wine balance. Balance is very important. If a wine doesn't have balance, it's what we call angular. And that's when the different pieces of the wine, the acidity, the tannin, and the alcohol, seem to be going in different directions. What we want is something that seems to be interwoven with the fruit. The fruit is the most important thing. This is what the wine is made from. The acidity and the alcohol and the tannin act as backgrounds in order to bring the fruit flavors forward and to have them linger on in your mouth. These are all very important components. Too much tannin, the wine tastes dry, the fruit flavor disappears. Too much alcohol, the fruit flavor disappears, and you're left with the burning sensation. Too much tannin, your mouth is dry. Too much acidity, and your mouth waters. So it's balance of all these items together that gives wine its length and breadth of taste. Today we've tasted 3 different wines: Pinot Noir, Merlot, and Cabernet Sauvignon. Each of them has different fruit flavors and different levels of body, tannin, alcohol, and acidity. The idea is for you to understand that this is the basis from which all wines are made. What's important is that you understand that each wine has a different style. If you decide that one style seems more agreeable than another, my suggestion is to go out to your local store, buy a couple of bottles, as many as you can afford, within the same type, say Cabernet Sauvignon, and taste them against each other. This will help you to refine the flavors and the styles of that particular wine. But be adventurous. There's more than 3,000 wines available in any one marketplace, and we need you to try every one of them, sooner or later. Color: white wines, straw, lemon, gold, and with age, amber. Red wines: purple, ruby, garnet, and with age, brick. Aromas: white wine, Chardonnay, apple, pear, oak. Red wines: Cabernet Sauvignon, red fruit, baked red fruit with oak aromas. Taste: white wines, acidity, low, medium, or high. The sensation of your mouth watering. Tannin: there is no tannin in white wines, so we don't get the drying. Fruit: lots of fruit. It feels like putting a fresh, ripe apple in my mouth. Sweetness: again, there's no sweetness in this wine, but the fruit feels very forward, very rich. The Cabernet: drying, tannic, full-bodied, rich. Enjoy. Today we're going to do a very special tasting. We're going to taste 2 Cabernets from the same producer, 2 different vintages. This is called a vertical tasting. We're going to taste the 1999 Cabernet Sauvignon, a Napa Valley wine, California, and a 1994. So we'll be tasting a 5-year-old Cabernet and a 10-year-old Cabernet. There's also a thing called a horizontal tasting, and that would be if we were tasting Cabernet Sauvignon from many producers from the same vintage. We'll start with the youngest wine. This is the 1999. And we'll be looking at the color, smelling the aroma, and then we'll be tasting. If you have any questions, feel free to ask at any time. The first thing we'll look at is the color. And the basic colors for red wine are purple, ruby, and garnet. The easiest way to look at the color is to take the glass and to tilt it at a 45-degree angle away from you. We're going to look down through the glass, and we have our white paper underneath, and we're looking for the deepness of the color and the color that we see. I would say both of these wines are in the ruby to garnet family, with the 94 being slightly lighter. What we're looking for is the color in the center of the glass as it reaches out towards the edge. And if you can see in the 94 in your right hand, all the way to the edge, you could start to see just a little bit of brown or brick. That's what shows the aging. Next, we're going to swirl our wines, starting with the 99. And we're going to sniff. Now when you sniff, make sure you put your nose deep in the glass. It's very important that you put your nose all the way in the glass and you inhale deeply. Don't be afraid to do it. Everybody does it the same way. And think about the aroma for a second, and think about what flavors or what aromas it reminds you of. Cabernet usually has aromas of, say, cherry, or blackcurrant, or cassis, or dark fruits. Do you get any of those?
Maybe some cassis.
Cassis? Blackberry?
A berry.
And it can also have an aroma of oak. Oak usually smells like vanilla or like toast. Let's swirl and sniff the 94. Here it's a little bit different. You can smell that the aroma has aged a little bit. When the bottle's aged, we call it bouquet. So the aroma of this is for young, and bouquet is the smell of an older wine. You can also see on the edge here a little bit of sediment that's started to dry on the bottle. These are fruit solids that have fallen out of the wine, and as the wine ages, they cling to the side of the bottle. They'll also gather at the bottom of the bottle. There's a piece down here, this is called the punt. And this was originally designed for storage and transport so that the bottles could fit into each other. The other handy thing is as the wine is aging, it allows the wine to set here, and when it stands up before serving, to fall down into here. So when you're pouring the wine, you don't get sediment into the glassware. Any kind of aromas for the 94? And you can go back and smell them again and again. In fact, smell one, then smell the other. Don't be afraid.
It's a little milder, isn't it?
It's a little milder, right. And it doesn't smell as much like fresh fruit. It smells sort of like maybe baked fruit, or I'm getting something that akin to, say, saddle leather.
Yes.
Some people think that's a hard term to use. It's just what it reminds you of, maybe some earth, but in a very positive way, not a negative way. The color's very strong, considering it's 10 years old. Generally speaking, the stronger the wine, or the bigger the wine, the slower it'll take for the color to change. A lighter wine will age much faster. Now we get to do the tasting. When we're tasting, we're going to put a good amount of wine in our mouth, and we're going to move it around. What we're doing is we're trying to get it over our acid receptors, which are along the sides of our tongue, and we're going to see if there's tannin, which is across the back of our tongue. And we're going to look for alcohol, which we can find in the back of our tongue, down the back of your throat. What you're gauging this all against is the fruit, the concentration of the fruit in your mouth. Now we're going to taste the wine. Pay attention to the sensation of the fruit in your mouth, and also feel the weight of the wine in your mouth. Okay, it'll be light, medium, or full.
We start with 99?
We're going to start with the 99. We work from youngest to oldest, fullest to lightest. Think about the sensation in your mouth, the fruit. You can feel the acidity. You can feel the weight, full-bodied, but not too tannic. Let's try the 94. Do you see how the flavor is the same but softer?
Yes.
The wine has taken on a different sort of personality. A young wine can sometimes be called angular because its different components seem to be going in different directions at one time. A wine with age on it becomes more complete, rounder, softer. So all of the elements that make up the wine start to become in harmony with each other. This is why we age red wines.
What happens to a wine when it ages?
Well, it's interesting. White wines as they age become brown. Red wines as they age become lighter in color. They go through a stage where they go through brick color, and then they'll become less and less color until, actually at one point, they'll become clear. The fruit, these in the glass is all fruit solids that are in suspension, and they're being held there by the alcohol and the tannin, the acidity. After a number of years, those fruit solids will start to drop out, and the color will become lighter, as you can see in these two glasses.
So where does the color come from?
That's an interesting question. The color for wine comes from the grape skins. So white wines make white grapes, come from white grapes. But you can make a white wine from a red grape, as long as you don't let the skin come in contact with the juice. So red wines get their color from the skins. The longer that the juice sits with the skins, the more color is taken out of the skin. There's also flavor, aroma, and tannin come from the skins. One of the reasons why red wines have tannin and white wines don't.
Now, this wine here is 10 years old, correct?
Correct.
So where has it been stored all this time, and how have you stored it?
I've had this wine in my cellar since it was released, about 1996. The best place to keep wine is in a cellar where it's cool and dark and free of vibration. We talked about fruit solids in wine. If you take this wine and you put it, say, in a refrigerator where the compressor cycles on and off, it will actually vibrate the wine just enough to speed up that fruit dropout. The other thing is heat will hurt the wine. It will, what we call, matterize the wine, and it'll change its fruit flavors to, say, first to baked and then really to cooked. That's not what we want. Light is the other enemy of wine. You can see that these wines are bottled in dark glasses. Wine that's made to age is usually bottled in these dark style glasses. This stops ultraviolet light from entering the bottle. Some wines you'll see on the back wall that are bottled in clear glass are meant for early drinking, so they won't get hurt as much. Heat, you have to be very careful. If the heat temperature in the cellar goes up slowly and comes down slowly, it's okay. But spikes in heat will really hurt the wine. In the top of every bottle is a little bit of oxygen. If the wine gets too warm, it'll push the cork right out of the bottle, and the wine will spill out on the floor. So, if you have a choice of only a couple of things, the first thing that you want is cool, vibration-free, and no light.
Now, is there a certain temperature that you should keep a wine at?
Storing wine is best for long-term storage is about 55 degrees. The wine will change very slowly at that temperature. The problem is when you serve it, it's going to be very cold. So for storage about 55 degrees, although you can store up to 70 degrees as long as it stays constant. You don't want to have temperature swings up and down. Serving temperature for a red wine, they say, is room temperature, but every room is a little bit different. Generally speaking, 65 to 68 degrees is perfect. Just cool enough to make the wine refreshing, but just warm enough so that all the aromas can come out. White wines can be served slightly chilled, and it's all personal preference, but you should really try to drink your white wines a little bit warmer than just out of the fridge. Let's say the fridge is at 32 to 40 degrees. 60 degrees, 58 degrees is a perfect temperature for white wine. The warmer the wine is, the more expansive its bouquet or aroma. The colder the wine, the less you can smell and taste. So a trick is, if you have a wine that you don't like the flavor of, stick it in the fridge, let it cool down, and serve it icy cold. Then you won't taste it.
Where does the term Cabernet grape, where does that come from?
Well, Cabernet Sauvignon is the name of the grape, and it's grown pretty much all over the world. California, and Chile, and Australia. But it really was famous from Bordeaux in France. Here it's a blend of other grapes that make Bordeaux, but principally it's Cabernet Sauvignon. Other grapes like Chardonnay started in France and have migrated their way around the world. One of the reasons why is because they're very easy to grow. They'll grow in good soil and bad soil, with lots of light, with a little light, lots of water, a little water, and they make very good wines in a number of different places. Other grapes like Pinot Noir, famous in Burgundy, also in France, haven't done so well when they've gone outside of their homeland. They're very finicky about the soils and the style of the sun and the soil that they're grown in.
Is California the best place for American wines?
Well, California has had a head start on the rest of the country, but there have been an explosion of wine growing, grape growing, and wine making all over the United States, from Texas to Colorado to Michigan, the Pacific Northwest, Oregon and Washington, in New Jersey, in New York, in the Finger Lakes, and also out on Long Island. So grapes are grown now probably in 49 out of 50 states. The only one is Alaska. It's probably the only place you won't find. Although there are some people making wine, but they're using concentrated grape must that's brought up from the 48 states.
Is there a country that's most famous for its winemaking?
Oh, well, you'd probably get an argument from anybody if I said one country over the other. We're pretty sure that wine making started with the Phoenicians. They found amphoras, jars, clay jars that were sealed, and they found residue of grape in them. Since they probably didn't use them to transport grape, it was probably wine. and they've dated it back to about 8,000 years. So from there, it traveled outward with each of the empires. But it was a rather crude way of making wine. They didn't have the controls that we have today. So going forward, maybe it was first it was the Italians, and then it was the French, and maybe now it's the Californians, and soon to be possibly the Australians, and then the Chileans, and then the Spanish, and then the Portuguese. I mean, every country has its own grapes, and they make their own style of wine. Even though it says Cabernet Sauvignon on the label, if it comes from Chile, or it comes from California, or it comes from Australia, it can taste completely different. So it's important to learn not just the grapes, but where they come from.
Now, is there a certain reason why they keep wine in glass bottles and not in plastic bottles?
Well, glass has been used for hundreds of years. Originally, wine was stored in clay vessels, but they're porous. They let air in, and that spoils the wine. Then it was barrels, oak usually, and those were good too, but they let in air, and they were kind of hard to move around. So after the invention of glass, and it was something that was reproducible, they started putting wine in glass. The problem is you have a hole here and you have to figure out a way to close it. So they came up with an ingenious idea, I don't know who did it, of taking the bark off a tree, an oak tree that's found in Portugal, which is called the cork tree. And they cut the oak off, they cut the bark off. Now the tree has to be 25 years old before they can take the first harvest. And you have to wait 8 years before you can harvest it again. So they take the bark off and they punch out the corks. A cork that fits in the size of this, the hole in this bottle, is actually almost twice the size of the neck when it starts. And what that does is it covers all the imperfections as it expands. It covers all the imperfections that are inside the glass. So it makes a perfect seal. There was a problem a few years back where we were getting bad cork in bottles, and it was changing the flavor of the wines. So a lot of wineries have switched over to using what are called synthetic corks. These are made out of usually food-grade plastic or a rubber product. And they work okay, but they have two problems. One, they're only one size and they don't expand. So they either fit in the bottle or they don't. And a lot of people have trouble taking them out, and once they take them out, they can't put them back in. A lot of winemakers in Australia and in New Zealand and in the Pacific Northwest have switched to using screw tops, just like we see on our soda bottles and everything else. People think that that might downgrade the image of wine, but it really makes sense for somebody who just wants, say, a glass of wine a night, pour it out, screw it right back on, put it right back in the fridge. Plastic isn't a good source for wine storage because it is also porous. So over the course of time, it will allow minute amounts of oxygen in to spoil the wine. It's okay for short-term storage, say like if you're going to a picnic, but it doesn't work for long-term storage. And once upon a time, most wines were made to age.
What is the best way to store an open bottle of wine?
That's a good question. The problem with wine, the biggest enemy of wine is oxygen. So once you've opened the bottle, oxygen starts to break down the wine inside. This is, as you can see from the amount that we've poured, if we were to cork this off right away or close it off right away and put it into the fridge, it would probably last 3 or 4 days. But it's not going to be any better in 4 days than it is right now. If we were down to about half a bottle, it wouldn't last that long. So the secret is the more air there is in contact with the wine, the faster the wine will oxidize or go bad. If you really want to drink, say, just one glass a day, wine is packaged in many sizes, all the way from a 187 to a 375, which is half the amount of this bottle, and this is a standard size bottle, 750 milliliters. So if you just want to drink a half bottle, you can just buy half bottles.
Let me ask you, I come into a wine store. I basically know next to nothing about wine. How can I find the bottle that's right for me, medium price, say, and all I have to go by is the labels?
That's a tough question. The quick answer is you have to find a wine shop that you can become friendly with. Let them know what kind of wines you like, what styles. But the most important thing is price point. Pick a budget. I would rather people drink 3 times a week at $7 than once a week at $21. The more you taste, the more exciting and the more different taste you'll have, the better you'll know what you like. So if you can find a retailer, a wine shop, where you can go in on a regular basis, buy a bottle of wine at a price point you feel comfortable with, learn the basic components of wine, decide what you like about it and what you don't like about it, then go back to that wine shop and say, I bought this wine the other day and I didn't like the tannin. So a good wine shop will then point you to wines with less tannin. So stick to a price point and taste as many different varietals, grapes, as you can at those price points. Don't be afraid to experiment. You can always make it through one bottle of wine.
So can you tell me a little about how wine is made?
Wine is the process of taking grapes, letting them ripen on the vine, squeezing the juice out of them. And for red wines, the juice and the skins will stay together. And then what will happen is a little bacteria called a yeast will consume the sugar that's in the grapes. And it's part of its process, it produces heat, carbon dioxide, and alcohol. So that's where the alcohol comes from. In white wines, it's the same process, but the grapes are squeezed, the juice comes out, and it's taken directly to tanks or to barrels where it ferments. That's the process of turning the sugar into alcohol. The amount of sugar in the grape is directly related to the amount of alcohol that you'll be able to get out of the finished product. Let's look at the 1999 wine. Let's go through the process of swirling, sniffing, and tasting, and see what your reactions are. You pick up any flavors?
I can really smell and also taste black cherry. And I also pick up a smell of oak.
Oak barrels, where the wine is aged, the insides are charred, burned, one to shape them, and two to add flavor. So, you can have flavors from vanilla and all the way up to a burnt sort of taste, like a char or a toffee and coffee.
It also makes my mouth water.
That's the acidity. Acidity is what gives wine life, and it's what makes your mouth water. So, wine to age, like this wine is aged, needs a good bit of acidity.
I think I detect a little aroma of spice. Spice, and then there's an earthy quality to it.
Okay. Spice is often also associated with oak aromas. You can get that, especially with certain types of oak. Earth can be, it's hard to determine where it comes from. Sometimes it smells like briar, like a green briar, or slightly green scent, or sometimes it smells like wet earth.
Right.
So it's an interesting aroma, and it's what we call complex, because we have black cherry and vanilla, we have earth and spice. So we've got 4 aromas and 4 tastes just in one glass. So we refer to that as a wine that's complex. A lot of wines have just one flavor or aroma, let's say blackberries or blueberries, and when you put it in your mouth, that's sort of the only sensation that you get.
Also, it made my mouth a little dry.
That's the tannin. Tannin is found in the grape skins. It's also found in the oak barrels. It's another component of the wine that makes it live long. You need a lot of tannin and a lot of acidity and a lot of fruit intensity in order to make a long-lived wine. Let's taste the 1994. Don't forget to swirl, sniff, and taste. What do you think of that?
If I'm not wrong, the older wine actually tastes a little less full-bodied than the younger wine.
That happens as wine ages. You can see that the color starts to lighten, the tannin level starts to lighten, the acidity lightens. The alcohol stays pretty much the same, but that also starts to lighten up. And what I mean by lighten, it gets softer or lower. The level actually gets lower.
I actually had a scent of leather. Is that possible?
Sure. What happens as a wine ages is the small amount of oxygen that's in the bottle, the acid and the alcohol and the tannin are all chemical elements, and they combine and recombine over the course of time. And so you can take something that has, say, black cherry, and it'll evolve into something that we call leather. This is the mystery of wine aging.
I also smell a little bit of like floral smell to it. Is that okay?
Absolutely. People think that just because wine is made from grapes that it has to smell like something like a fruit. But it can smell like flowers, and we smelled earth and spice, so it can smell like a number of different things. The secret to smelling wine and to tasting wine is to trust your own instincts. You've smelled all the things that are in this glass before. It's just, can you get your mouth to say them? This is the thing that wine drinkers have the biggest problem with. They know what they're smelling, but they don't have a word for it. Our sense of smell is probably our least used sense. but it's very powerful and very evocative. So some people find it easier to smell the wine and to think of maybe a time or a place. Maybe it reminds you of your grandmother's cherry pie, or maybe it's with the earth, maybe it's playing under your grandmother's porch, or maybe it's a hot road after a summer rain shower. So some people use these things to remember their aromas. And if you really want to be a great wine taster, the easiest way to do it is to smell everything that's in your environment. When you get up in the morning, you have your first cup of coffee, give it a big, deep smell. And when you put it in your mouth, taste it, roll it around, and feel for tannin. Coffee has a lot of tannin. Tea has a lot of tannin. Soda has a lot of tannin. And pay attention to where the sugar is and the acidity. You can do this with your dinner at night. You can do it with your breakfast in the morning. You can do it while you're driving your car. I find it very interesting when I'm driving down the road. I can smell when the guy in front of me is smoking a cigar. So as you learn to trust your nose and will be able to pick up more and more different scents. And then you'll be able to catalog them. The easiest thing to do is to go to a florist shop, pick up a bunch of flowers and just smell them. I find it easy to say the name of the flower at the same time, and it seems to record it in my brain for use at a later time. When you come back to smelling the wine, it'll be amazing how many of those aromas you're able to pick up.
But are flowers actually used in the wine making process?
When it says wine on the label, it can only be made from grapes. If it's made from anything else, whether it's elderberries or dandelions, it has to be dandelion wine. It can't have just the word and then say dandelion. So when you see only the word wine on the label, it means it's made from grapes. Apple wine will say apple wine.
Let's get down to basics now. How much does this wine cost?
To do a tasting, a vertical tasting, and to do wines that are going to last a while, you're going to have to pay a little bit more money. The 1999 retails roughly for about $40. The 94, when it was released, was about $25. But if you wanted to try and buy it today, you'd probably have to pay $100 for it. That's one of the reasons tastings are sort of expensive, especially when you do a vertical tasting and you're looking for older vintages. One of the reasons why most people don't get to taste older wine. When you go into your wine shop, you'll notice that most of the vintages are current. It's very expensive to hold wine, and you need the best conditions to store the wine in, otherwise it loses its value.
So how long should you hold wine?
That's the great mystery. Part of it depends on where you're storing the wine. Part of it depends on the quality of the wine. Again, wines of this quality are meant to age. This 99, you can taste it now, it drinks very nicely. In another 3 years, it would probably get softer and rounder, like velvet. The 94 is drinking beautifully now, but probably could last another 3 or 4 years also. We drink our wines very young, so most of us don't get to experience the older wines. It's hard to explain to people why they should not drink the fresh fruit and the full tannin. People have come to like that, so it's harder to explain to them why waiting. I suggest that if you find a wine that you really like, put a few bottles aside, try one after a year, try one after 2 years, and see if it gets better in bottle. You're never going to waste wine. Even if you had one that somebody gave you for an anniversary or a birthday and it seems to be too old to drink, it's always worth opening and tasting. If it isn't any good, you just keep a second bottle handy and you open that one instead. In fact, you can have a party with your friends, bring out all these old wines that you found, and open them up, and you'd be very surprised at the range of flavors that are available. Just make sure you have some backups.
Now, how can you tell if a wine has gone bad?
That's another good question, and one that there's no way to show you until you get one. But we were talking about the cork, and inside the cork is a little bacteria, and that bacteria would leach into the wine and it would give it a bad flavor. Smells something like a musty basement, okay? And it's called cork taint, or TCA. It's very popular for people to say a wine's cork now, even though it's not. There was a time when we were getting a large amount of wines with this cork taint. The number has come down, partially due to the different closures and partially due to cleaning up the corks. The other things that can be bad in wine is what we talked about with heating. They can get madderized, they can get cooked. Other winemaking faults are too much sulfur, and everybody knows what sulfur smells like. It smells like a burned match. It makes your forehead tingle. Another one is called hydrogen sulfide, and that's a smell that we all know too. That's rotten eggs. Right. These are all things that occur naturally in the winemaking process, but they're due to some fault during either bottling, aging, or fermentation.
Can you tell me something about food and wine pairing? For instance, we all know the the old myth, red wine, meat, white wine, fish. Is that really true?
It's not so true anymore. What we've decided on, and everybody has their own taste, so you have to learn, you have to trust yourself. When it comes to wine, trust yourself. A lot of people say, well, I like to drink Pinot Grigio and I like to eat a steak. What's wrong with that? The answer is absolutely nothing. But when food and wine are matched correctly, and we'll go over a couple of quick ways to how you do that, the result is sort of sublime. One thing enhances the other, and it may not be really noticeable. I always tell people when they say, I like Pinot Grigio and steak, that I like chocolate and scallops, but I don't like chocolate scallops. So there are two things that should be able to go together because I like them. It's not that simple. The easiest way to judge food and wine is to start with the body, light, medium, and full. If the food you're eating is light, medium, and full, then you can decide which range of wines. Light meats or light fish, light-bodied food with light-bodied wines, and on up the scale. The second thing that you're going to look for is the acidity level. If you're taking a piece of flounder and you're just going to broil it, and you squeeze lemon on it, you're going to look for a wine of higher acidity than if you finish it with melted butter and herbs. If you put chopped fresh tomatoes on it, you can go to a red wine. But again, you have a light-bodied fish, so you want a light-bodied red wine. Red wines that have tannin go very well with fat. When you put a piece of protein or fat in your mouth, it covers your tongue. So the receptors that sense the tannin and the acid and the alcohol get covered up, so just the tips show. The tannin has a tendency to clean that out, so it makes it refreshing. When a wine has no tannin, it doesn't do that to your mouth, so you can go with, say, a more well-done steak. So if you like your steak medium well or well, go with a less tannic wine, and if you have a high tannin wine, you should really be eating your meat rare or medium rare. Well, I hope you enjoyed our tasting today. This is just a small part of how big wine is. But if you break it down into little pieces, and you start to look at it, and you learn to trust your own sense of taste and smell, you really can have a lot of fun with this. Start with white wines, sweet wines, dessert wines, anywhere you want to start. But work by tasting a little bit at a time, and make sure you taste often.